everybody, we're back. It's 2019. Welcome back to Saltier Politics 2019 edition. Emily, how were the holidays?
The holidays I was warm. I was in Florida. I really stayed away from Twitter and had kind of a break from that, which was really nice. I caught up on a ton of Bravo and E! News, and what I found out is that they don't have commercials at the same time, so I could go back and forth. It was a nice brain break.
So I too was in Florida. We were in different places. I was in Naples, and then I drove from Naples to Vero Beach. And then I had to go back to Miami, which was freezing, by the way, when I went back. But yeah, I feel like I got my Florida quota. And
now we're ready for the year. I'm ready for all the political mess that's already happening and already saltier than ever about it.
I've got a lot of salt stored up. This show is so amazing. We have Marti Gould Cummings. He is a drag queen and he's a political activist. And this guy just took down a major Democratic organization in Hell's Kitchen in New York City, took it over a couple of years ago and just got a bunch of people elected district leaders, and has a really inspirational story. In the conversation that we had with him, I thought was incredibly inspirational, regardless of your political affiliation. I just think it's something that everybody should listen to, and I was incredibly impressed with him.
You know, it was interesting. I met him on election night this year during the midterms at a voter watch party, and I was reporting, and a lot of people didn't want to talk to me because I was Fox, and I get that. But Marti, and I think we'll hear in the podcast about just his background and really the empathy for different kinds of people, wants to educate people and wants people to learn about people who are different from them. And that's how we met and kind of kept up a conversation on Twitter, and now he's here, and if you want inspiration for 2019, this is the interview to listen to.
I got to say, I'm so happy we kicked the year off with him because he was amazing. Hi, everybody. Welcome to 2019 and our first episode of Saltier Politics. I'm so excited, Emily, because in studio today, we have Marti Gould Cummings, who is a very prominent drag queen / political activist who not only is a political activist, but kind of took on the man and the machine in New York City, which for those of you who are not from New York would know is not an easy thing to do, and won. And really, you got involved, Marti, because of the election. You were kind of horrified by what happened in 2016, and that got you involved. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I as a drag performer, it's always kind of just instinctually known that drag is like a form of political activism in itself, specifically because drag queens and transgender people kind of led the Stonewall riots in 1969. Mm-hmm. So that I think it should just be like inherently known that like drag is always political. But for me, you know, I was like a shock jock kind of comic. You know, I made a lot of I've been doing drag professionally for almost a decade. So for most of my career, I made like Joan Rivers, Lisa Lampanelli, Sarah Silverman kind of jokes that now looking back, I'm like, ooh, I don't like, you know, that's not my style anymore, you know, but like, so that's like where my career was. And then the primaries started for the presidential election, and it became this kind of election we've never, you know, politics is always kind of dirty, which I don't really think is right. I don't like believe in that. But
you're in the wrong town and be involved in politics for that.
I mean, trust me, we'll talk all about that. Right. But you know, so it kind of became something else when Donald Trump came down his escalator and announced his bid for presidency. I don't mind like a celebrity running for office, like Ronald Reagan was an actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jesse Ventura. I don't mind that. But what I mind is openly racist rhetoric, you know, as a way to electrify people. And the first thing he ever said was that Mexicans are rapists. And that kind of set this, you know, kind of my brain kind of rewired in that moment. And it kind of rewired in how I presented myself on stage. I was like, okay, so me as a comedian making jokes now takes on a different meaning because we have a presidential contender actually saying like horrible things, you know, and so I started researching like how can I get involved to politically, you know, to make sure a Democrat wins. At the time it was the primary season, so I was figuring out who I wanted to vote for. And
who was your person?
I was very torn between Bernie and Hillary. There's so much about Hillary that I love, and there's so much about Bernie I love, but in the end, I went with Hillary. Hillary's like the most qualified person we've ever had run for president, and I think institutionalized sexism kind of like really worked against her, and things that men do they can get away with, but Hillary would do, and it's like, oh my gosh, this woman, this monster. You know?
I mean, we had a guy saying he would grab women by certain body parts, and that apparently got him to the White House. And Hillary, meanwhile, was taking the blame for her husband's extramarital affairs, which I still don't get, by the way.
This is kind of like very, very off topic, but I am such a Monica Lewinsky fan. Like, I met her at an event, and she's like the coolest, nicest person, and I think she really. And so that's like kind of like a conflict of mine also as a Hillary supporter. I'm like, was that handled in the best way? I just think Monica's done a great thing with her TED Talk and her speaking out about cyberbullying, because I think you have a president who is a cyber bullier.
Despite his wife's best efforts to have the "Don't Cyberbully,"
Be Best,
right? Be Best campaign.
But so I was looking for a political organization to get involved with, and the one in my neighborhood was kind of. They said they were Democrats, but they didn't really do very many Democrat-like things, and they weren't very active unless you were like in this kind of old boys club, and they've been around for 125 years, the same family running it, and I called my city council member at the time, and he was a friend of mine, and he was like, well, why don't you start something? And so it just kind of went from there and became now my whole life.
Is that what you're doing now? What are you doing? I mean, the election's over, so are you still keeping it going?
Yeah, well, I always tell my audiences, I'm like, the election may be over, but the revolution's just begun. You know?
I love that. That's a great line.
Because we're never done fighting. You know, it's like people. There's always going to be groups of people that are attacked, and right now it seems that every group of people is being attacked. And so I was president of the Hell's Kitchen Democrats for 2 years, and I just had my last meeting as president last week, because a year ago, I lived in Hell's Kitchen for about 6 or 7 years, something like that, 6 or 7 years. And that's the neighborhood that the Hell's Kitchen Democrats was formed in, obviously, where we elected district leaders to get rid of the McManus Club, which was in power for 100 years.
Just for people who are not from New York and they don't know, Hell's Kitchen is the area in Midtown that's west of Times Square. So it's part of the theater districts in Hell's Kitchen, and it's a really vibrant, incredible.
It's had a great wild history,
right.
And it's a beautiful, vibrant neighborhood that's continuing to go through a lot of changes. Like a year ago, my husband and I were living in a studio, and we have 2 dogs, and we want to expand our family, and so we ended up moving to Hamilton Heights, which I love, and so we worked it out with the club that I will remain on because our club is you can be a member of our club whether you live and or work in the neighborhood, and I work in the neighborhood. So I said I would run for one more term, get us through the midterms. Then I decided, I can stay on the executive board as a voting member of the board. But I felt, pass the torch, give somebody else an opportunity and to lead the club.
So you were talking about passing the torch, but the guy whose organization, the McManus organization, that
he
you
never
beat.
did.
Well, he did. He was going to pass the torch to his nephew, right? He was around for 50 years.
Yeah.
And this quote is so priceless because I work in politics and I've worked with guys like this, and this is your typical entrenched ward politician, for lack of a better description. So this quote is that basically district leaders can't help people the way we used to help them, admits McManus. I'll skip all the other stuff, but you can't help anybody anymore. You can't even take care of a jury notice. And Emily and I were talking about that before you came here. And I started cracking up because that's what it shows to really be out of touch. Like, yeah, you can't take care of a jury notice. It's not legal.
Yeah, it's not legal.
It's like Tammany Hall's over. You can't do that anymore.
This was the last remaining Tammany Hall club.
Although they beat Tammany Hall 150 years ago to become the McManus organization.
Yeah, well, to say that district leaders don't do anything, for those who don't know what a district leader is, it's a volunteer, non-paid elected party position. But our district leaders that beat them have worked to get the actors unions and musicians unions involved as being poll workers so they can have some sort of income if they're out of work during election cycles. My council member uptown, Mark Levine, is working to get ferry service on the west side, and so the district leaders in Hell's Kitchen are working with him to ensure there's a pier available. So there's so much that they do, and they don't get paid to do it.
I love though is your journey, because I was reading when becoming a drag queen too. It wasn't your plan. You kind of went into it, but you kind of. What's amazing with you though is you kind of don't have a plan. You didn't plan to be it. You kind of pivoted and then adapted, which you did with politics
and
too.
And then they changed. I think it's important. I always tell young people, the great thing about being a drag queen, and now a drag queen with a political platform, is a lot of young people come to see me, and a lot of young people follow me on social media. Social media is like it can be used as a very negative, awful place, or it can be used really positively, and I try to use it positively. And I didn't know any of this, so how are these young people who follow me going to know anything about this, county committee and district? They don't know what that is, so it's my job to educate them on that. But I always tell young kids, who are like, oh, I'm going to do this, and by this age I'm going to do this, and by this age I'm going to do that. Everybody like tries to lay out the roadmap of their life, and I'm like, that's great. Have an outline of what you want, but don't like draw the whole map, because the universe is going to like present something to you that you couldn't even envision. I moved to New York City 2 weeks after I graduated high school. I was 17 at the time. And,
We're from
Maryland. My family had been on the same farm since 1782.
Wow.
And so moving to my aunt had lived in Tarrytown. She was like the only other one who like got away. And I love where I'm from now. Growing up there, I was really resentful towards it, but now I have a fond admiration for the history of it. It's like true American. And so I moved to New York, and I wanted to be a musical theater actor. That was like what I wanted to do. I said, I want to be on Broadway. That's my dream. I'm gonna, and then I, now there's all these great shows that are very queer friendly. But I remember being in school, and my teacher was like, oh, there's no roles for you. You're just gonna end up a drag queen or something. There's nothing out there for you, because almost 14 years ago there wasn't a lot of queer stuff on Broadway, and I really was offended by that. I was really upset. I was like, no, I'm an actor. I can do this. And I did some work, and then I did this off-Broadway show that I played. It was like an androgynous, I guess now it would be known as like a non-binary, non-gender conforming character. And I really just loved playing dress up with that. It made me feel like nostalgic for the freedom of being in like kindergarten playing dress up, And I was like, oh, this is so fun. Like I can experiment with this. And then it just kind of, the universe just opened that door for me, and I ended up being a drag queen. And then I realized, I started like going to nightclubs, like dressed up and telling jokes, and I realized that I am like good on them. And it was like I don't know how to explain it without sounding like cliche and like dumb, but it was like one of those moments where like like in Mrs. Maisel. Do you watch Mrs. Maisel?
Oh yes, every single episode.
Have you seen Mrs. Maisel?
I've tried to get into it, and everybody tells me I have to, and I can't get into it.
I love it so much, but it's that moment where like you just. I remember I just went on stage one night, and I grabbed the microphone, and I just started talking about my life, and everybody laughed. And I was like, oh, and this isn't like I'm bragging, but it's like, I feel like whatever, I don't know what I believe in God, but whatever God is, I think blessed me with the talent of like being able to just like tell stories and like.
It clicked for you.
Yeah. And it clicked, and it became my career, and it's like been my full-time sole income for almost a decade, and then drag led me into politics, and because of the platform drag gave me, I'm now able to have a platform in politics because I'm visible and seen. And sure, the headline is drag queen did this in politics, drag queen did that. But if it's getting people to click it and get educated, then I'll use that.
Do you feel like? Do you feel when you're talking and you're up on stage, do you think about it beforehand, or do you just start to riff?
Now I do more because, they're, like I said, like Sarah Silverman, I reference this a lot because Sarah Silverman recently came out saying she's not going to make jokes about gay people anymore because she, like now, looking back as, that's not really productive and it's offensive. And I look back at jokes I made and I think, oh, that's racially offensive or sexist or this. And at the time, it was like I really, really loved Joan Rivers and Lisa Lampanelli and then later Amy Schumer and that style of humor and Howard Stern and stuff. And now I look and I think, oh, that's not like where we're at as a society anymore. And that's not where I'm at as like an individual or person. So now when I'm on stage, I think more about what I'm saying because I don't want to offend somebody, or I just don't want to, I think you can be smarter about humor than like digging into somebody. And so that's what I try to think.
It's interesting that
more
you say
about
that
it
though,
now.
because I read an interview not too long ago with a comedian who was arguing the opposite, that it's your job to make people uncomfortable, that it's comedians who can
Yeah.
get away with it because under the guise of humor. And I think it was in the context of sort of, I don't know, somebody's maybe even telling Bill Cosby jokes that in retrospect are not so funny, but they were basically saying that no, it's our job as comedians to make the audience uncomfortable and not. And I wonder, and you're sounding more like it may be your job as a comedian, but it's not something that you as a human being.
Exactly. I can see that argument because like, so for example, if I'm going to like make a joke about a certain group of people, and if I'm only making that joke, then I think that's awful. If you kind of do what Joan Rivers did and you kind of blanket and make fun of everybody, like Bianca Del Rio, famous drag comedian, I think it's okay. But I think it's also important to be like aware of what you're saying, you know, I think it's important to be aware of what you're saying and know that it has impact. Words like matter. And so I think it's okay to like be offensive and push the boundary, but don't, I don't know how to word it, but like be smart about it, you know, like don't be offensive just for the sake of being offensive. If you're going to make like a racial joke, do it as a way to make fun of the people who are actually racist. You're not making fun of that. Like you can make the stereotype joke, but you're not actually making fun of that demographic of people. You're making fun of the people who are actually like shitheads.
Do you feel like
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Do you feel like now that you're in politics, you have to be more careful about what you say because it's going to reflect not just on you but on your organization? I know a lot of politicians feel that way.
Well, I look at it. Okay, so yeah, and I've had this brought up a lot. Like people are like, oh my gosh, what skeletons you have in your closet? You've said all this, and there's video of this, and you tweeted this, and you did that, and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, all right, let's like break it down. Like politicians are human beings, and human beings make mistakes and say things that as 21-year-old Marti is going to make jokes and say things on social media that 31-year-old Marti isn't going to say or do because you evolve as a human being. And I think you have to give people that understanding that human beings can change and do evolve. And so, like, I think it's important. Like, I love Alexandria Ocasio. I think she's great. I think she's a new age of politician. We were DMing last night because she was like putting on nails, and I was like giving her advice on what nails do you know. But I just think she's so open and real, and I love her. And I think that as a politician, I don't really worry about my past because I own everything I've ever done, every mistake I've ever made. And as a politician, like I met my husband on Grindr. There's probably dick pics of me out there.
People actually meet people on Grindr?
Yeah, we didn't even have sex for like a month. He like wanted to go on a date, so we did. It was wild. It was crazy. But you know, like I'm 31, a 31-year-old queer person in New York City. So I've done things that most politicians probably have done and will deny.
Right.
And I think that's important. So to answer your question, like I don't really have like any thing to hide as a politician.
I think owning it is awesome, and that's what resonates now. But something that really I think is really cool about you, and I think we could be similar on, is I'm from Florida in a smaller town in Florida, and people were very much in a box and afraid of what they didn't know.
Sure.
And moving to New York, I am liberal and I do have very open beliefs, but also come with the understanding that people just haven't been exposed to a lot. And, we live in a New York bubble. So a lot of my friends who are just born and raised in New York or very liberal places, it's hard for them to see outside and see the more conservative views. And they see often conservatives as dumb and as the other. And I'm kind of like, you're doing exactly what conservatives are doing to you. And do you find that coming from Maryland and coming from the smaller towns kind of gives you that insight?
Sure. I think, just as much as we're in a bubble in New York or LA or Chicago, people in the Dakotas and Minnesota and these places, they're in their own bubble as well. It's just a different bubble than ours, and I grew up in the county I grew up in, Kent County, Maryland, has I think 18,000 people in it. Like more people live within 2 blocks of me than in this entire county, It's rural Trump country. And that's where I'm from. And so I have that understanding of this is the mindset is different, and it's exactly what you said. People aren't necessarily exposed to what we're exposed to, and my in-laws are Mormon and live in the desert and in Arizona, and so what they're exposed to is not what I'm exposed to. So I think it's about understanding each other and finding that common ground as American people, and I think that's important to remember. I think a lot of times we get very caught up in, oh, these liberals think this, or conservatives think this, and they're dumb, and this and that, and the socialist, and blah, 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 blah. And we just hear a lot of talking, we just hear like clickbait language instead of like actually having dialogue. And I think it's important to just like break it down and be like, okay, well, why do you believe this? Why did you vote on this issue? Why is that important to you? And find the common ground. Like, most Americans are immigrants, I would say the vast majority of us, and we came here for, that, whether it's my family who came here in the 1600s or somebody who came here a week ago, we came here because America is supposed to be that land of opportunity. And so I think people in smaller parts of the country are scared because job industries are changing, economic situations are changing in terms of where jobs are available around the world. And so it's very easy to say, well, Mexicans, it's their fault. It's very easy, but really it's like, coal is not the industry it once was. Steel is not the industry it once was. So now what we have to do as politicians on both sides of the aisle is create green opportunities to employ people. We need to create, our infrastructure is terrible. We need to instead of putting $5 billion into a wall, let's put $5 billion into highways. You can employ so many people in that. And I think it's about finding that common ground. We all want every person to succeed. I don't think anybody really wants to lock children in a cage on the border for their belief. And if they do, then they're evil. But well, I think the vast majority of conservatives I've interacted with from the middle of this country do not want to see children ripped away from their mothers.
It's funny that you say that. I talk about this all the time. Emily's heard me say this. I was at Fox for very many years, and I live on the Upper West Side in New York, which is, like a liberal bastion, right? The People's Republic. I work in
a strong voter bloc. They turn out all the time.
Please, we turn out. No, definitely. And I work in Democratic politics. And you would think I would go through my entire day not ever meeting somebody who's not like-minded based on where I live and where I work. But when I was at Fox all those years, it was nice because I'd be able to spend a good chunk of my day with people who completely disagreed with me on virtually every topic. And when the cameras were off, and so you weren't trying to score points and you weren't trying to gin it up for ratings, and you weren't trying to, everybody wasn't playing a role. What you found was that people still believed what they believed, but they believed it in a much more thoughtful way. And so
you could have a conversation.
You could have a great conversation with them. And I think, to the point that you're making, so much of the opposing views of people are caricatured through cable TV or talk radio. And so nobody really thinks that the other side is intelligent enough, even though they disagree with them, because of the fact that they just look at these caricatures that are not really well thought out. Or they listen to talk show hosts or cable news hosts who don't really believe what they're saying to the extent that they're saying them. They're just saying it because it's good for ratings and that's their job, right?
It brings in viewers,
Sure. So you're right. And you live in Hell's Kitchen, but you're from, as you said, a Trump country. Emily, you're from the great state of Florida, where I had to go not once but twice over the last month, and my condolences to you. But you're right. And I'm from New Jersey, which is the People's Republic on the other side of the Hudson. But it's still, you're right, that the neighbors that we talk to who are not necessarily like-minded like us are all still thoughtful. They're just not.
I think it's about having conversation. I think what's lost in American politics today is, you have to look at somebody like, take John McCain, for example. I disagree with 99.9% of the things he believed in as a Republican. The difference is from John McCain compared to a Mitch McConnell or a Donald Trump, is he was willing to sit down with his colleagues. He was willing to sit down with Kennedy at the time and Biden and people and say, okay, well, let's figure out what is the best compromise for everybody, you know? And I think that's what's missing in American politics. It's so divided. I think bipartisanship is important. You're not going to get anything done if you just keep pointing fingers. You have to sit down and have a conversation and say, okay, enough is enough. What is the best for the people? Not for the Democrats and not for the Republicans, but what's best for the people, you know? And I think that's what's missing. And I'm from this small town in Maryland. It's like nobody lives there. But, you know, education is key. And I had a great opportunity a couple years ago. We've now been doing it yearly, but a couple years ago we started this. A small community theater there said, we want to have you come do like a concert. And so I did, you know, the local newspaper interview, and I sent them my headshot, and it was my non-drag headshot. The theater called me right away when it came out. Why are you not in drag in this picture? Everybody wants to come see drag. And I was like, no, this is not going to go. I thought I was going to get shot. I was like, I can't do drag there. I'm literally going to get shot by some like redneck or something. But what happened was, this is why it's important to go to these small towns outside of our New York kind of sphere. Because education is the way to open-mindedness. And so I did this show, the first one, and this grandmother...
In drag.
In drag. And I took a couple Broadway friends of mine down, and we did it was to raise money for the theater summer camp or whatever. And this grandma came up to me the first time, and she said, I read about this, and I thought this would be something good for my grandson. Nobody really understands him. Nobody understands. Like, he doesn't have a lot of friends. Nobody in our family knows how to connect with him. I thought this might be something good. So I met her grandson. He was, I don't know, maybe like 15 at the time. I don't know how old he was. He was in high school, maybe a sophomore, junior in high school. And he was wearing clothes that were so baggy. And you could tell, you know, like when people wear like baggy clothes when they're teenagers, just because they're uncomfortable in their own skin,
right.
You know, they're trying to hide who they are. And he like couldn't even make eye contact, and he was barely said a word. He was very shy, very closed off. And he just said, it's nice to meet you, whatever. So we did the concert the next year, same grandmother. So happy you're back. I want you to meet my granddaughter. And I said, oh, okay. You know, I'm like, naive. I'm like, great. Granddaughter, same kid.
Wow. What a great story.
Happy, eye contact, talkative, joyful, wearing beautiful clothes. And she said to me, your concert made me realize that people from here can be who they are. And she started her transition, and the school was very accepting. And because of like stuff like that, you know, another instance, this kid wanted to use I don't know the exact like story, but it goes something like this kid, you know, was transitioning, there's another kid, and they wanted to use the bathroom, and the teacher said, no, you can't use that bathroom. But the kids in a small town like that, you grow up with each other. You live with each other your whole life, you know? So the kids were like, what are you talking about? Like, just, and they sued the school board, and they won. And so now they have to have, like, you know, gender neutral bathrooms available in this small town. But that's what it is. It takes just a little bit of education and a little bit of exposure, because it will open people's minds to people who aren't like them. And I think that's when Republicans can come on board with people who don't look like them, because they have to be exposed to them.
I think the education is so important. I think that's also kind of a thread in your work, even with your docuseries, the Shade Queens. Mm-hmm. I think also even just teaching people about what drag is and in the struggles that go into it, and kind of the path that's paved. It's not like you just get on stage every night in a dress and it's glamorous. It's hard work.
It's a lot.
And people come from...
Do you do your own makeup?
Yeah, if I have like a photo shoot or something, I'll have somebody do it. But
Yeah.
I do drag 6 days a week, so I can't.
You got to come over and teach me how to do makeup, man. Ever since I left TV, it's been a disaster.
Well, I always tell women when they're like, oh my gosh, I want to do makeup like you. I'm like, no, you don't. I have it's like pounds of heavy.
So it's TV makeup. I used to have that makeup.
Yeah,
Emily.
TV paint stick.
Right.
It's heavy. It's like.
How long does it take you to do?
It depends on like what I'm doing. Like generally the entire process, from like shaving to makeup to putting on the hips and the boobs and the hair and everything, the nails, it's 90 minutes to 2 hours.
So do you feel like you're the same person just in a drag outfit, or do you feel like you're a different person once you? Like, do you feel like you've just transformed into somebody else?
Drag gives me an opportunity to kind of like. Yes and no. I think my drag is... I used to be very much like, well, I'm different in drag than I am out of drag. I'm more reserved. But now that I'm in politics, like drag has been a real driving force of like exposure for kind of like the messaging I'm getting across. So now it kind of goes... I'm like, okay, it's like... It's me, but with a wig on. Like,
yeah.
You know? Because now it's like very much like, this is how... Okay, drag is like the way to get the attention, to get the message across. And so it's... I guess it just depends on what event. I guess it just depends if I'm doing a show or a political event.
What's interesting to me, based on what you did, taking on this entrenched organization, Hell's Kitchen, and also you were talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and what she did is I feel like millennials aren't waiting for permission anymore, right? Like my generation, which is Generation X, kind of dutifully got in line, and we had to wait for somebody to clear the way, and then you turn 40 and you're like, okay, that person's 65, hopefully they'll be moving on now. And meanwhile, you guys aren't waiting.
Well, that's the thing with New York politics that frustrates me so much, is it seems kind of like everybody has an heir. Like so-and-so runs for office, their chief of staff, or they're this person is going to just automatically be who we know is going to be elected when they retire. And I don't think that's how it should be. I believe in primaries. I think primaries are important. I think if you don't think, and I'll say this even like, I don't know, like I'll just use this as an example. Like I love Maxine Waters. I think she can do no wrong. Right. I love her. But if you're somebody who lives in her district, and I'm just using this as an example because she's somebody I like, I don't want to sound, but if you're somebody who lives in her district and you think, you know what, I think I could do a better job and here's why, run.
Yeah.
And let the voters decide. I don't think it should be. I also am a strong believer in term limits for Senate and Congress.
See, I totally disagree with you because I think we do have term limits and they're called voters.
But that's the thing.
We saw that with Crowley's seat, right?
Well, yes, but that's to me, I think a very rare instance of that happening. I think a lot of these people what's his name from Utah? He's like older than dust.
Or Hatch. Yeah. Well, he's done.
Yeah. Well, now, but
got replaced by Mitt Romney, who, by the way,
just got done. But But it's like if
his 17th trip around.
If you're in office for that long, and if not term limits, then maybe I don't know. I mean, Maxine Waters is in her 80s also, so that's probably not a great example because I do love her. But I don't know. I just think I think there should be an opportunity for new people to come in, and I think, like you said, like millennials are kind of paving that way. I've been told by a lot of people, oh, don't run now because of this, or don't run for this office because of this, or don't do this because of this. And I'm like, I'm going to make the decision that's best for myself, my family, and what I think is best for the voters.
See, I think that's spot on, because I remember people were saying about Barack Obama back in 2008, oh, wait, he just got there. He hasn't been there even one term. And who's he doing? Why is he taking on the Clinton organization? And why is he running? And everybody said, kind of sit down or shut up to him. And he didn't. And he won.
Truly the greatest president we've ever had.
Right. So he won. So, I mean, look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Whatever you may think about her politics,
whatever you think of her politics, take that out of the equation. You have to respect her. Yeah, she's 29 years old. She was a bartender a year ago, and she said, I don't think this person represents my district anymore. I'm going to try to do something about it.
And she won.
And she did.
Which is amazing.
She won. She's the most popular politician in the country now. Like, that's incredible.
Or Donald Trump, for that matter, who, everybody was like, well, I mean, this is the flip side of the same coin, which is you have a guy in charge who doesn't have any experience with anything. But I mean, to some extent, same thing. Everybody said, this guy's crazy. He's never going to win. Why is he running? And, with the help of our friends, Murmansk, he's now president. So
I think if you have somebody like, obviously I loathe Donald Trump, but if you have somebody like that who does not have the political experience, somebody like Ocasio who didn't have the experience, and they win, what she's doing, which is what different from Trump, is she's surrounding herself with people who know what they're doing and are going to help her learn about the job. And Trump just puts himself with yes people. That's different.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to have, like, for example, so I didn't know shit about politics when I started this club, but I made damn sure that I surrounded myself with people who were able to educate me. So when I go to a town hall or a press thing or just a meeting in front of the neighborhood constituents who have questions, I'm going to know how to answer it, because that's my job. If you get involved in politics, whether you have experience in it or not, if you decide to throw yourself into the political arena, you have to gather as much knowledge of both sides of the coin as you can, so you can make your case. And that's why I think in New York, especially, like I encourage people to be on their community boards, apply to be on their community boards. If you don't get appointed to the community board, still go to the meetings, because that's like I'm on my community board. The borough president appointed me to it. And I feel like, everybody's like, oh, you're in politics because you're fighting Trump. And it's like, yes, of course. That's like why initially I got into it. But then I went to some meeting the other day where we're listening to arguments over a new bike lane and how it would get rid of a certain amount of parking spots within a 10-block radius, and how the people who ride their bikes are for it and the people who drive cars and need parking spots are against it. So that's like what local politics is.
Do you like that, or are you?
I love it because it's day-to-day living.
And you see changes when they enact something. You see.
I know community boards in New York are incredibly influential in that sense.
It's incredible, and I love it. And it's like, so I originally got into politics because I thought, oh, this bigot is our president. What are we going to do? And then I realized there's so much more to it than that. It's day to day. Local politics is so important. The community board, the county committee, the district leader, to like bring it back to what we were talking about before. It's that everyday living is what's so important. And then you listen to, oh, well, I see the bikers argument, so I see the drivers argument. Okay, what? And then how do you find a solution? And what came out of that meeting was the Department of Transportation and the constituents coming to kind of a consensus to figure out a way to make everybody happy. And that's what I love about it. Danica Roem, she ran for in Virginia, legislature. And so many people were like, oh, you're just running because you're transgendered and that's all you have going for you. And she's like, no, that's not why I'm running.
She's also hyper qualified. She was great.
Incredibly qualified. Yeah. But she was like, I'm running because our streets need like fixing. Like
right.
We need to fix our roads and our traffic lights and like the day-to-day like boring. She said politics is boring. Like, and that's what I love about it.
But what's the plan for you? I mean, do you want to do stuff on the national level because of things like Trump and obviously addressing those issues? Are you more into the local scene? Do you not have a plan yet? Whatever comes up? I'm sure you have a plan.
I think in terms of the national level, I think it's, it's I'm not there yet. Maybe someday. But I think,
why not? Ocasio-Cortez wasn't. And
I also think you make a lot of change too through your routines and through comedy.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's a hard thing. It's that balance of, okay, what am I getting done as an activist versus as somebody who like makes laws? What are the pros and cons? And that's like where I'm at right now. What are the pros and cons to each? Do I want to run for office? Yeah, absolutely. And that is like in the works. But I think for now, for me, it's best to stay on like a local level, to continue to learn and grow. And then maybe what is it? It's like, I can't, like I said earlier, I'm not going to like map it. I have the outline of what I think is best. I have like a great team of people around me who are kind of helping me get my, life together to start a campaign. But I think it's like the campaign I want to run for is 2 years away. So a lot can happen in that time period.
Right.
So
you're not going to tell us what it is though. Right. We're not going to get it out of you.
I haven't officially announced
We don't want you to announce here. I don't know if that triggers disclosure laws or campaign finance laws.
No. I just think I won't announce my candidacy right now, but I think it's a very open secret that the city level is something that I'm very interested in.
Excellent. What do you think of de Blasio?
I am grateful to be an advisor on his nightlife council.
Oh, okay. All right. Then
I think it's okay to be an advisor on an advisory mayor's council and have disagreements with the boss. I think that's okay. I think some days he does great stuff, and other days I'm like, oh, that's not what I would do, but okay.
Right.
But you're seeing how things get done, what to do and not to do. So you're putting yourself in a very big learning position.
I was appointed to that council by Corey Johnson, the speaker of the city council, who's a very dear friend of mine, and I love him very much. And so I think it's, I think I was appointed to that position as somebody who can see all sides of the coin again and be like, okay, I get this, I don't get this, I agree with that, I don't agree with that. And I think it's the same thing. If de Blasio had a bunch of yes people surrounding him, he wouldn't be a good leader. So you have to have people who don't always agree with you. I sat on stage with him during his State of the City address, and there was a lot of stuff that I jumped to my feet and applauded and said, that's my mayor. And then there's other things that were like, okay, well, that needs some work.
It's funny. Having worked with a lot of politicians over the years, most of them say they don't want to be surrounded by yes people, but the reality is most of them want to be surrounded by yes people, and
you can't be. You have to have people tell you, because you can think something as a politician or just a person in life. You can think, oh, this is the best idea. This is the best decision, and then it may not be fully thought out, or there's things that need to be worked. So if you're just surrounding yourself with yes people, are like, yes, this is great, then you can really, especially in politics, kind of fuck a bunch of people's lives.
I love taking no people shopping with me, because when you look bad in an outfit, I don't want to be yes. I want to no, you can do better. So if I think you need no people in every aspect.
Great Rudy Giuliani's drag performance back in the day. Speaking of no people.
That was the strangest.
Remember that?
That's the strangest clip. It's so weird. He's oh, what a piece of shit. I just think he's such a piece of shit. But he's a yes person. There's people out there who are so hungry for power that they will just eat shit. And it's like, you sold, Lindsey Graham is one of them. Like, what is wrong? Like, I just don't.
I think Lindsey Graham made a very strong, I don't think he's being blackmailed, by the way. Everybody thinks he's being blackmailed. I think he made a very easy political calculus that a Democrat can't beat him in South Carolina, but he can lose in a primary.
That's exactly right.
And Donald Trump, who I'm sure and I'm convinced he loathes, because I can't imagine that he suddenly had an epiphany that Donald Trump is amazing after criticizing him for all those years during the primaries. But he made a political calculus that Donald Trump needed to be on his side so nobody could primary him from the right.
Yep.
And I guarantee you, the minute he gets reelected in 2020, if Donald Trump is defeated, he'll trash the hell out of Donald Trump.
But that's the same with Kellyanne Conway. She's trashed Donald Trump before. Mick Mulvaney, he trashed Donald Trump, but they have a nice job title and a little bit of power, and all of a sudden,
yeah,
changes.
Exactly. It's go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just think in politics, I'm not, I'm never going to compromise my integrity to make you like me. And I think if you don't like what I'm doing, fine. But if I believe that it's the morally right thing, I'm going to do it.
I think also in your profession, though, in acting and in drag, you need to have a backbone of steel.
Totally.
In this.
Well, people, it's so funny. I always compare them like, okay, what's worse, a room full of drag queens or a room full of politicians? They're both pretty wild.
It's probably really competitive in both places, right?
Yeah, I think drag is, people are always like, oh, you're a drag queen, how are you in politics? I think drag has prepared me to be in politics in a lot of ways.
First of all, if you get up on stage, there's nothing harder than stand-up comedy.
There's nothing harder than stand-up comedy at 1 a.m. with a bunch of drunk people.
Yeah.
Because they're either going to go really far one way or really far the other. So you have to be able to control that environment. And I think, for me as a politician, I feel like there's a lot of people, I hear murmurs of like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. Constantly people trying to tell me I can't. But it's like, you know what? I moved to New York City when I was 17 years old with nothing. I built a career for myself. I'm an alcoholic drug addict who's been sober for almost 8 years. I have built a career for myself, a business, a brand, I said I want to do a TV show. First TV show I ever pitched, I sold it.
That's amazing.
And it was on TV.
Tell us about the show.
What I mean? Shade Queens of NYC. It was on Fusion. I am so proud of it. We were on for a season and we got to tell 8 drag queens, life stories. But for me, it's like, so everybody who says, oh, you can't. Well, I say I can and I will. And so people saying, oh, you can't run for office. Well, I can and I will. And if I don't win, then at least I had an opportunity to let some kid like that grandmother's granddaughter who came to my show know there's somebody like me, there's somebody who represents me, and there's somebody who's going to fight for me whether they win or lose. And I think right now what politics needs is there's a lot of people who aren't being invited to the table, and so they're making their own tables. People we have that entire crop of wonderful, diverse women in Congress now. They weren't being invited to the table, they built their own.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. I think on the city level, when this next city council, their term limited city council, there won't be, not that that's what I'm running for, but just using this as an example, but there'll be a lot of queer people who are no longer in office. We need queer representation. And I believe that, I think that is a space I can fill. And
So you kind of feel like you're doing it not just for yourself, but you're doing it to set a marker.
So if I run for office and I don't win, then I'll keep doing stand-up and using my voice in that way for people. But if I do win, then God damn it, I'm going to make sure that every single young queer person knows that every time somebody tries to roll their rights back, there's somebody who's going to be louder and more vocal than they've ever had in office.
That's awesome. And by the way, I want to thank you because you are the first guest we've had on the podcast who actually asked for coffee as their drink.
I don't drink.
No. And I'm really grateful because as you can see, we have a shelf here for people who can't see of just tons and tons of scotch. And as everybody who listens to this podcast knows, I hate scotch more than I hate anything on earth. And meanwhile, I'm being forced to chug it every time somebody shows up for this podcast. So I'm enjoying my cup of coffee.
Oh,
so
yeah.
thank
I
you.
said, well, this is my time of day, my midday latte. I always have.
I'm thrilled. Although almond, I don't know about almond. I'm a purist.
I'm an almond milk kind of girl.
No.
I love it. I love it so much.
Oh, no. I'm a pure black and bitter. That's how I like my coffee.
Oh, yeah. That's what my husband likes it like.
Who's your husband? Tell us about your husband.
Oh, he's the best. His name is Blake Allen. He's a PhD candidate and a musician and a composer, and we're very opposite.
What's he getting his PhD in?
Viola.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
He's very smart. He's very talented.
That's great.
Do you guys collaborate on any songs or anything like that?
Yeah, we just did a concert at Lincoln Center together, which was super fun. He arranged all the music and put the band together, and we did a concert in Massachusetts, and we did a concert in Mexico recently together. He's a beautiful musical arranger. He's really fantastic. It's really, really beautiful. I did an album that raised money for the Ali Forney Center, and he did all the orchestrations for that. And arrangements. He has like an ear for, he can never seem to hear me when I'm trying to talk to him, but he has an ear for for music.
That's awesome. Did Emily tell you about Two Truths and a Lie?
Oh, I have to, Two
Truths and a Lie.
Okay.
You got to tell it, we have to guess. I think my record is undefeated, by the way.
I've lost
I think Emily is fully defeated.
So I just tell you three things and you have to figure out which ones, two of them are true and one is false.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Number one, I started musical theater because I wanted to be Annie, because I saw a production of Annie and I told my mom I wanted to be an orphan and I got in trouble for that.
We have so much to talk about with Annie, but keep going. Go ahead.
Two, I performed with Angela Lansbury before the Tony Awards in 2009. And three, I had an opportunity to meet Joe Biden when I was in third grade and shake his hand.
Oh, God. This is tough.
I'm going to say
Angela Lansbury's false, even though I hope that's not true.
It's false.
Oh, undefeated.
I met her that night. I didn't perform with her.
I'm going to say I was going to choose that too because I didn't guess.
I was trying to think. I was like, well, I just said that I performed at Lincoln Center, so maybe they'll believe that I performed with Angela Lansbury.
I love her.
My husband's obsessed with her, and he's so pissed that I had met.
Did he see the new Mary Poppins? She's in it.
We haven't seen it yet because our schedules. We don't want to see it without. Cause we'll go to movies with friends and stuff without each other. But this one, we're like, no, we're going to this together. But we've never. Our schedules are both so.
So I got to tell you about Annie. So when I was little, Annie came out. The movie Annie came out.
The Carol Burnett version.
Oh,
I did work with Carol Burnett before.
She's awesome.
Very fun.
And I was obsessed with this movie. And I would literally lie in bed, and I would pray to God or whatever, deity, that I would somehow get discovered by a Broadway producer, and he was gonna make me be Annie.
Was it still on Broadway then?
It was on Broadway, and I was obsessed with this movie so much. I remember there was a summer, I forgot the year that it came out, that I was a latchkey kid, and I would listen to Annie 24/7 and sing along to it. It's so good.
I just loved Annie when I was a kid. There's a great documentary called Life After Tomorrow. You have to watch it.
What's it about?
It's all the girls who played Annie as kids.
Wasn't Sarah Jessica Parker one of the original Annies?
Yeah, and she was from Ohio, and she had
Did you know that?
She has 11 siblings, and she became a famous Annie because she sang with Bob Hope, I think is what it was. I think a thing. And then her playing Annie supported her whole family.
I know. I heard that. Yeah, I heard that about her.
But she's very nice, by the way. what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, that's documentary Life After Tomorrow. It's wild. But the original Annie, who played it in the out of town tryout at Goodspeed in Connecticut, is in it, and it's very interesting. It's kind of sad. Like some of the women grow up to be like very grounded, put together people with like very successful lives, and then the other half are like still chasing that. They did one show their entire life, and it was when they were like 9 years old, and they're like still chasing that, and they like went on tour, and there's like drugs everywhere, and like and so that like that was their child.
But can you imagine being plucked out of all the girls that tried out for Annie, especially
you're in it
when you're 9 years old and you're it?
You kind of get fucked up because then like you have a growth spurt and you're fired, and then your
is
family,
that what would happen?
Yeah, and then your family like can't survive. So it's
Yeah.
this documentary is like both beautiful and like extremely sad.
I have to check it out.
Oh, it's really
Life After Tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it might have been nominated for an Oscar. I'm not sure. It's really fantastic.
Interesting.
Life After Tomorrow. You have to watch it. It's a whole new
So
perspective.
funny.
to
I
Annie.
love that you got in trouble for telling your mom you wanted to be like.
Yeah, she's like, what do you mean you want to be? What
But you said, I saw in some clip, your parents come to your shows.
Oh yeah, they're wild.
That's so awesome.
They're great.
But they're down in Maryland.
They're in Maryland.
Right.
They were just here for when my Lincoln Center show. They were here, and then they. I used to do a monthly show in Philly. They would come to every month.
Were they supportive when you told them you're going to be drag queen?
My parents are they're very like, okay, what, as long as you're happy and you're healthy and you're not hurting yourself or another human being, do what
Great.
you want. They're very, very supportive. I think when I first started drag, they might not have understood it, but they supported it.
Right.
And now, all I fucking talk about is drag and politics. So they have a better understanding now. Almost 10 years into drag queen, I think they're like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's the plan with the drag queen act? You're going to keep doing it?
I mean, it depends on what happens politically.
Right.
I'll always have drag in me.
Right.
I think if I get elected to office, then I can pull it out for fundraisers and charity events, and then when I decide to not be a public servant anymore, go back to it. But that's all, again, like listening to the universe's cues. I can make that plan, but I don't know what's going to happen. And so I have to follow the signal. I'm a big believer in just following the signals that are presented to you. A lot of times I think the universe is kind of like a cliche, broad statement, but I think the universe presents you with signals, and you have to either pick them up and take that, or you like defy it and go the other way. And so I'm just gonna listen out, and if I'm supposed to be doing drag when I'm in office, great. If not, then no, we'll see.
That's awesome.
I think, and that's because you keep kicking ass on every single thing that you pivot to and from. So we look forward to seeing where you go, and
I love drag
are
and
fully
I love politics,
supportive.
though.
I know.
So
we do too.
Exactly.
I
So
love them both.
awesome.
Maybe people always say that, like, well, you campaign and drag, and I'm like, well,
Why not?
if it's an LGBT event,
Why not? Why
hell
not?
yeah.
why not? I'm not going to go to everything in drag,
Yeah.
but if it's a queer event,
I mean, know your audience, right?
what? Exactly. And I think this is very funny. I love this story. I was doing an event for the HK Dems, and Jerry Nadler was our guest speaker. And I had my face and makeup on because I had a show after, and I was very nervous and excited to have Jerry there. I think it was my first time interacting with them, and since then I've seen them a bazillion times. But I got up there and I was in drag, and it's congressmen, and there's a bunch of state senators and assembly people. There was a lot of political people at this event, and I'm like, oh fuck, I'm in drag. This is like embarrassing. This is gonna be weird. And so I got up and I said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited to be the first drag queen to ever introduce Congressman Jerry Nadler. Welcome, Congressman Nadler. And he gets up on stage, and without missing a beat, he goes, I hate to burst your bubble, but I've been a congressperson for 25 years in New York City. You're not the first drag queen to introduce
sure.
me, and you won't be the last.
I'm sure.
And it made me laugh because I thought, oh, you're right. He's probably done a bazillion Pride events or whatever. But it just made me laugh because I felt so uncomfortable being at this political event in drag, and him kind of breaking that ice for me, let it be. I was like, okay.
I got to tell you, because we have to end this, but we started this by talking about Stonewall, and I was down there today in that area, and I didn't realize that they had built a national registry, and that park is beautiful.
It's a national. Obama did that. It's a national park. It's a national
Yeah.
park. It's.
I actually walked through it. It's a beautiful
It's a
statue.
national monument.
Yeah.
The building is part of the monument, and I think it's beautiful. I think it's a great way for people who lived it to have a place to reminisce, and I think it's a great place for people who don't know what it is to learn about it, and young people to get educated about their history. I think in any sort of civil rights movement, it's very easy. It's very easy to forget where we came from and what happened. And I think it's very easy for queer people, young queer people, who are living with basically total equality under the law for the most part. Now there's things being rolled back by Trump, obviously, which we're fighting. But, for 8 years under Obama, we had a lot of forward progress. So it's easy to forget the fight that came before, and that's continuing. And so I love that they have the Stonewall Monument, and the AIDS Memorial is a couple blocks away. And I think it's it's about time America had that. In Amsterdam, they have a beautiful, outside of the Anne Frank house, which was like, again, we can't forget history. It's so important to have those places. But outside of the Anne Frank house, there's the monument to the queer people persecuted in the Holocaust. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing that the Dutch government did. I thought that was really beautiful that they honored those people. And so now for our country to honor the people who fought, police brutality in 1969, I think that's really beautiful. I'm grateful for that.
It's amazing because I was just saying this to a gay friend of mine. We were talking about the fact that how quickly the movement moved. It stalled for millennia.
Yeah.
And then over the last decade, just the transformation.
Well, I think, we lost, Stonewall happened in 1969. And it started with Marsha Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, like really kicking shit up. And then that's when it's 50 years of Pride this year.
Yep.
Which is major. And then in the 80s and the 90s, we had this moment in our culture as queer people where an entire generation was basically wiped out. And so I think that's why the movement kind of stopped a little bit. I think that's why it took a pause, because you had, obviously there's people from that generation who are still alive, but there's thousands of people, thousands of activists and political minded people and artists and just people who I think could have really moved the movement forward, who were lost to a disease that was ignored by our government.
And it's funny, I was thinking about that too, because I was walking by St. Vincent's Hospital.
Which is now fucking condo.
Which is condos, and I used to live across the street in a building literally across the street from St. Vincent's. And now they're condos, and I was thinking, again, that St. Vincent's was the hospital.
The only place.
That treated,
the only place. Yeah. I think about it. I think about just the bigotry that was not that long ago. It wasn't that long ago.
No, it was the 80s.
People saying, I'm not going to, putting bodies in trash bags and leaving them on the loading dock. That's
well, because it was like the plague. Like you couldn't touch somebody with AIDS.
But it's like not that long ago. And I remember, my mom is an amazing person. She's so beautiful. I remember when I was growing up, my mom always said, oh, you remind me so much of I think his name was Peter. I can't remember. We'll say his name is Peter. I can't remember. She's like, oh, you remind me so much of my friend Peter. You remind me so much of my friend Peter. You're just like Peter. And then when I came out of the closet, my mom said, she finally told me the whole story of Peter. I didn't know it. I just remember being a little kid and my mom said, oh, you remind me so much of my friend. So my mom was growing up in the 50s. My mom was born in 1951. Small town, very, farm. She had a friend, and my mom would always play the cowboy and he would always play the damsel in distress, and they were best friends their whole life. And in the early 90s, I think it was, he had moved to I think it was California. I'm not sure. I may be getting some of those little facts incorrect, but and then he came home. He got really sick, and nobody would help him. Nobody would touch him. But his parents took care of him, and my mom would go and help take care of him, and then he passed away. And so when I came out, my mom was like, this is the story of my friend, and this is how people treated him in his most desperate time of need. And she said to me, she was like, be safe in your life. And she said, don't ever treat people the way that he was treated. And so I think that's why my parents are proud of me for being a drag queen. And I think that's why they're proud of me for being in politics, because they know that if things like that come up again, they know that I and the people I surround myself with will make sure that doesn't happen.
That's an amazing level of empathy to pass along to your son, especially as you said.
There's
Growing up in
I
Trump
just
country.
remember like whenever I remember this one moment. I'm gonna get emotional talking about. I remember this one moment as a little kid. I came home and I talked to my mom. I was crying. I was crying so bad. I was sitting on the couch. I remember in our like little family room, and I was like, I don't have any friends. I don't have any friends. I'm like such a loser. Nobody likes me. And my mom said, oh, you just remind me so much of Peter. You're so much like him. And then I felt guilty putting this burden on my mom. I knew, as a little kid, I didn't know anything about him, but I knew that there was sadness on my mom's part about him, and I didn't want to put that. So I like made up this lie to my mom. I was like, "Oh, I'm just kidding. I have Bianca's my friend, and Jamie's my friend." They weren't my friends. They were so mean to me, but I didn't want to put this extra burden on my mom. And now, like as a grown up, I'm like, "Wow, my mom loved this man so much," and I just feel grateful that I'm able to kind of be an extension of that being for her, today. And so like my drag and my politics is not just for like the queer young people, but it's for people that we like my mom's friend who she loved, who she doesn't have anymore. It's like we have to stay loud as drag queens, and we have to stay loud as political activists, because we can never ever let that happen again.
Well, no, you can't get complacent. I mean,
It's very easy.
You mentioned the Anne Frank house, and if you've ever gone there, anybody who's ever gone there, it's horrible.
But you think, I went to the Anne Frank house, and I did not, you read about it in history, you read in school, and then we're walking through the Anne Frank house, my husband and I, and
It's bigger than I thought, by the way.
Yes, well, I think that's because like the museum
Right.
stuff around, but we're in there, and in her and her sister's room, there's pictures of movie stars, and a picture of Queen Elizabeth and Princess Margaret when they were kids. There's same, and you think Anne Frank today could potentially still be alive.
Oh no, I think she'd be in her 80s or so,
Yeah,
90s maybe.
She like any teenage girl loved Queen Elizabeth, who's still on the throne.
Well, I don't think she was on the
She
throne
wasn't
then.
on the, she wasn't
she's
on
a
the throne
princess,
then.
but yeah.
She wasn't on the throne then, but she was a princess, and somebody that this girl.
I think they're contemporaries. I mean, they're probably within a 5 year age.
Yeah, and so then I think that's not that long ago. But
No.
how quickly we forget, how quickly we're able to say, I certainly don't accept Nazis, but there's people who are now like, oh, that's not a big deal. These kids in their high school all doing the salute in their picture. It's not a big deal. They're just kids being kids. Well, kids being kids led to
Adults being adults.
Yeah.
Right.
Who
Right.
then persecuted people.
I'm conscious of your time.
Yeah,
So-
thank you. Yeah, I have no words right.
No. It was so wonderful to have you on. This is
Thank
like
you for
what a
having
treat.
me.
You're amazing.
Thank you guys for having me.
We cannot be more grateful to you for coming. We can't wait. I think speak for both of us. We can't wait to see what you do next. You've got to come back.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
You got to come back after you do your announcement and actually talk to us about it again. Super excited. Thank you
Thanks.
so much for
Thank
coming
you
on.
guys so
You're
much.
welcome,
I
Marty.
appreciate it.
All right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Marty. Take care.
Julie, what an interview we just had. I think if Marty didn't have an event after, I think he's getting ready for the Glam Awards. If he didn't have that, we would have continued to talk to him probably right now.
I have another 3 hours worth of questions for him. I thought he was great and real and empathetic and amazing. And I think he's got an incredible future in whatever he chooses to do. Sounds to me like he's going to be running for something soon. But regardless, it sounds like whatever he chooses to do, whether it's politics or drag or write the great American novel, he's kind of fearless. I mean, when I was 31, I had everything planned out in life because I was too afraid to take risks. But this guy's like the ultimate risk taker. He just goes with the flow. It's incredible.
It is, and he stands up for people who can't stand up for themselves or haven't found their voice yet, which I think is great. And I think he just owns it. He owns what he does. He owns his life, and it's super inspiring.
Yeah, I agree. What's making you salty this week?
A lot that the government's still shut down. That's pretty much making me extremely salty, because a lot of people are losing money and having to take from their child's college fund to pay for their rent and to pay for food. And also the idea that Trump is saving for border security about the wall, and we're not getting people at the TSA working.
Yeah, by the way,
9/11 happened because of the plane. So if he's really worried about terrorists, he should maybe fund the TSA.
yeah, I was flying out of I told you I went to Miami last week, and I was flying out of LaGuardia, and I asked one of the TSA guys. I said, I know you guys aren't getting paid. Thanks for showing up to work, basically volunteering your time to keep the rest of us safe. And I wish the president would acknowledge at least the work that they're doing to keep us safe, considering that they are now living, a lot of these people are living paycheck to paycheck without a paycheck. You know what's making me salty? My party of Reagan friends. We had an explosive 1-2 punch story. One was in the New York Times late last week, about the fact that Donald Trump was investigated by the feds for potentially being a Russian asset, which is just amazing. That we're talking about the president of the United States. But
Could I say you called it on clapback? Thank you.
I called it on clapback like years ago because I see them from a mile away. But secondly, even more troubling to me, because we actually don't know if he's a Russian. I don't think he's a Russian asset. I think he's an unwitting, he's like what the Russians would call a useful idiot. And don't tweet me that I called him an idiot. That's not what I mean. It's an expression. But the other story that I thought was just amazing is that he basically ripped up notes, refused to have any notes taken at any meeting of his with Vladimir Putin, and including telling the translator not to discuss it with anybody. So we actually don't know what was said. I mean, that's completely unprecedented to have a meeting with an adversary, and nobody, not anybody in his inner circle knows what was said. I think Rex Tillerson was at one meeting, but the Helsinki one, it was just interpreter, and that's amazing too. And so which point of I don't know, Lindsey Graham, we just talked about Lindsey Graham on the show, for example, these hawks, this party of Reagan, hawk machine, when did they speak up? When do they say something here is not right? And maybe we should stop being Republicans and start being Americans and actually question what the hell is going on.
Schiff hinted at a subpoena. Do you think he will?
Subpoena who, the president?
In the transcripts.
I think so. I mean, I know that a lot of people are talking about getting the subpoenas. Yeah, I think they have a legal fight on their hands. I certainly think they should subpoena her because her name is Marina Gross, the translator. Because here's what we know. We know that any intelligence that our intelligence agencies have in this meeting, they're trying to get from eavesdropping on the Russians. How crazy is that our own intelligence agencies need to find out what's going on with our own president by eavesdropping on our enemies because our own president doesn't want to tell them. It's amazing to me. And look, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Putin was and always will be once a KGB agent, always a KGB agent. Those guys are incredibly good at manipulation. Certainly it's part of their job description. They're incredibly good at psychological warfare and manipulation of their target. And that's before we even get to what they possibly can have on Donald Trump. I personally think begins at least with the fact that, as Donald Trump Jr. said, a large cross-section of their assets are Russian and that they don't need to borrow money from American banks because they can get what they need from the Russians. That was the Trump boys saying that. So how much more do we need to know before people start getting really concerned on the Republican side? That's what's making me salty, I guess. Republicans, get with it. Stop making excuses for it. If this were Barack Obama, I promise you, and those of you who watch me on Fox knew that I was critical about Obama's attitude towards Russia. So I'm not being partisan on this.
Well,
wake up, Republicans. Start being Americans.
Right.
Stop being partisans. It's not just about the next election.
We're salty about this, but I am thankful for this podcast to hear what else comes and how we are going to react to it, Julie.
That's true. All right. See you soon.